Hey, welcome to Rock Paper Hand Grenades. I'm Representative Gary Harper. This is Josh Solomon.
Name tag.
Josh.
Name tag
Josh.
today.
Yeah, you got a name
Yeah.
tag, but I can't read. You don't have a name tag? Well, then you're out of luck, aren't you? Today, today we have folks from Go New Hampshire on. Mitch Kopak and Nicole Fortune is on. You've been on a couple of years ago
Right.
with them ladies.
The ladies, it was about Marcy's Law.
That was about, yeah, wasn't, you weren't with Women's Defense League or something?
Nope, it was here with Bob Clegg and we were talking about Marcy's Law.
Oh, okay, yeah, that was another horror show
Yeah.
that I think is probably gonna get reintroduced this year, my guess.
Not yet, not
Yeah,
yet.
Not yet? There's no news? Okay. So anyway, Go New Hampshire's been around forever. You guys used to have the coolest thing ever when I first started, because when I first started, I was still working full-time as a tool maker, and I was and a legislator. And if I didn't had any extra days that I had to go to Concord, I basically had to take vacation time and stuff. But I used to take a vacation day for the Go New Hampshire legislative shoot they had every year,
Yes.
which was super cool. Because I'd be able to go there, eat food for free, and shoot guns that I can't afford myself. I shot an M1 Garand there, and I actually hit a target at 100 yards with iron sights and
There you
bad
go.
eyes.
Yep.
So I don't know, maybe.
Well, we're thinking about redoing that again. We're going to start that probably next year. We've done it year after
Hey,
year
Mitch,
after
Mitch,
year.
can you pull your?
Oh.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
We had done it year after year, and people kind of got sick of it. It was. What
I
ended-
thought I was told there was a legislative complaint about it because it exceeded the $25 limit that we're allowed to take,
Well, I didn't know about that.
and yet I got an invitation from the New Hampshire Business Association, I think it is, to go up to the White Mountains for a weekend. That was all paid for. So I said I wasn't going to take it because it seemed over the top.
Yeah, well, we're planning on doing it again probably this spring. We have a shooting group that's going to get together, and we think we're going to start doing it again.
Oh, that's
Because
cool.
I think we have a lot of legislators that need to be informed about firearms and how they work. And
Yeah, I know that every year it seemed there was at least a few more liberal legislators that would go to it just out of curiosity and come away with a completely different attitude about firearms.
yeah, actually, that's why we started it. We wanted to. It started with the assault weapons ban, so-called, so that people could understand what a magazine was versus a clip, and what the difference was between a black rifle and a brown rifle. You know, wood versus plastic, and one's no more dangerous than the other.
Well, actually, the wood one's more dangerous.
The heavier. Yeah.
They're
You drop it
heavier.
on
They
your
can
foot.
be used a lot more effectively as a club.
Yes. Yep.
So anyway, okay, no, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to suggest is since you're here, why don't you tell people what Go New Hampshire is and what you do?
Oh, Gun Owners New Hampshire is the NRA affiliate for the state of New Hampshire. We inform and educate our members and the public about legislation and also about firearms. We also sponsor some shooting teams in the state that go out to both Camp Perry and also some junior teams around the state for trap and skeet and 22, small bore, that kind of thing.
Can you do me a favor? When you do reports on those guys that go to Camp Perry, because they do it in the NRA magazine too.
Yep.
They say they got a 2 point. I don't know what the scores are. So they say they get this score, this score, this score. And as a layman, I have no clue what that even means. Like, did they hit a 1-inch diameter bullseye at 100 yards, or a 75-inch bullseye at 5,000 yards, or
Well,
what
for the regular CMP event, it's 200, 300, and 600
right?
yards. So effectively, when you're looking at a target,
Yeah.
the black looks the same size at 50 feet as it does at 600 yards. It looks the same size.
Right.
Just
What I'm saying is they never explain what those scores mean. So in other words, the score might sound really great to somebody who knows what they're doing,
Yep.
but to me, I don't have any idea what to correlate it to.
Well, if it's a 60 round, let's say it's a 60 round match, it's your maximum score per shot is 10, right? So whatever that score is that they give you, it's based on the numbers that you get. So 10, 9, 8, 7,
Right.
etc. And then afterwards, there's a number of X's. So in the middle of the 10 ring is X's.
Yeah.
And generally, that's how the winner is determined, by who has more X's. Because they usually have about the same score, and sometimes it's usually, this one had 7 X's and this had 5.
Right.
So the guy with 7 X's is going to win the match.
Okay.
With,
Yeah.
with the same score, 250, for example, or 295, or
Yeah,
300.
yeah, what I'm saying is they don't explain that, so I never have any idea.
Yeah, well, you should shoot CMP.
I would, except I'm,
Blind?
well, blind.
Blind, yeah.
That's a little bit of a hindrance,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that's why I use 30 round magazines,
Yeah, well, there you
you
go.
know.
They have scopes, you know, and red dots and all kinds of cool things, so you don't have to.
I have a scope on my AR, and it's a really, really nice scope. And when my eyes were better, I used to be able to shoot pretty close to 1-inch groups at 100 yards with
Yep.
it. But the only eye I have left is a lazy one.
Mhm.
And what happens is I zoom in on that crosshair, and it'll look crystal clear for a second, and then it fades.
Yeah, have you tried a dot, a red dot, or?
That's just makes it blurrier.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, that doesn't matter. That's why I got 30 round clips. Just keep
Yep,
pulling until the
magazines.
target falls.
Magazines, 30 round magazines.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Only Biden has clips.
Oh, bye. Nicole, could you inform us? So, one of the big events that's happened on the firearms industry in the last week or so is the state of Connecticut allowed a lawsuit to go through against Remington Corporation.
Right, right, and I sure can, and this is where I have to put my glasses so I make sure I do this correctly, because I had to write some of it down. But essentially, so we're talking about Sandy Hook, the victims of the Sandy Hook massacre, the
Yeah.
families of the victims of Sandy Hook massacre, sued Remington in Connecticut. Now, there's this thing, it's called the PLCAA. It was passed in 2005. It's a federal law. It's the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. And what this does is it stops frivolous lawsuits against manufacturers when somebody purchases one of their firearms and uses it criminally.
Okay, so just stop and back up for the viewers. So basically, one of the techniques for the anti-Second Amendment people, what they wanted to do was sue Remington, sue Ruger, sue these people, and if they had deep enough pockets, the companies would spend so much money on lawyer fees, whether or not they won the case didn't matter, because they could just keep suing and suing and suing until the gun company just ran out of money.
Right, so that's why they passed that law. It's a federal law in 2005.
So they passed a law in 2005, the Congress did. It was a good law that said you can't do a frivolous lawsuit against a firearms manufacturer, that because it would be equivalent to if what was that? Remember that that case where some guy used a U-Haul to run into a bunch of people at some event to kill them. It was a terrorist attack. That would be like suing U-Haul because somebody used your truck, not like it was designed,
Right.
but using it to kill people deliberately, and suing U-Haul and winning a case, which is insane, but that's in effect what these anti-gun people are trying to do.
Well, that's what they were doing, and that's why they passed this law,
Right.
preventing the frivolous lawsuits. Now, the caveat in that federal law is provided the manufacturer is obeying all laws.
Okay.
So what happened was the attorneys suing Remington got a bit creative, and they found in the Connecticut unfair or deceptive trade practices.
Yeah.
They said, well, Remington violated this law. So the case was appealed to the Supreme Court of the United States, and they opted not to take it up, which is a big message to everyone else, right? Well, wait a minute, they just found a way around it. Now, moving forward, of course, because other shootings, statute of limitations and whatnot, but moving forward, what is the effect of the Supreme Court not taking it up? Because it used to be an automatic dismissal,
Right.
and now they're going, they found an end run around it, around this 2005 federal law. And the way they did it is they're claiming like the advertisement that Remington was using with this particular firearm, which I believe is the Bushmaster. It's been in video games like Call of Duty. Some of the other things they complained about was, let me see. So meaning Remington marketed it as a military-style weapon, and they marketed it to civilians. Their promotional materials promised military-proven performance, and they accused the company of fostering a lone gunman narrative in the ads. So that's how they're saying that violates the Connecticut's unfair or deceptive trade practices.
They're trying to paint a picture military as nothing but killing, right? And that's
Right.
and that's absolutely not true, right? If I want military grade of something, let's say I want a ham radio with military grade, right? I want it to be hardened. I want it to be able to withstand harsh weather conditions, right? Military grade just means that it's of high quality. There are plenty of things that we use in everyday life that were developed for the government, for the military, right? I have a mattress at home that's memory foam,
grade?
and memory foam was invented for NASA. It was invented for seats in fighter jets, right? It's military grade memory foam. Right?
Right.
And so this term, military grade, they're trying to use that to demonize
Right.
the advertising.
Right, but even more so. Obviously they did. It was in their ads. This is
Wait a second. So you got a military grade bed?
I'm using that as
What
an
the heck
example.
goes on in your household?
I'm using it as an example of something that was developed for and by the military,
I
but
know,
we
that's
use in
not the
everyday
way I
life.
picked up on it.
Right.
But to be clear, they
Using
didn't say
that
military
term is-
grade. They said military proven performance.
Again, the same, right?
Right. Well, it is and it isn't, because from my perspective, who cares if that's what they put in their ads? Who cares?
Right.
These are military grade sunglasses because of the
Binoculars.
protection.
Yeah.
These are the
Night
military
vision.
GPS.
GPS.
Well,
Right.
what about the Humvees? If somebody uses a Humvee to run over a bunch of people, which
might-
is
might have
probably
something there.
might
Well, they-
happen.
The entire purpose of the Humvee, the entire purpose of that market is that for people who wanted a military vehicle. The same with
Right, I
Jeep.
mean-
when
Right.
Jeeps were first went.
Jeeps, yeah.
Why they have Army Navy stores. You
Right.
can buy
Right.
military
Right.
surplus.
Surplus. You can buy military surplus, and the reality is, who would want to ride in a Humvee? I mean, they're uncomfortable. So,
And loud.
Have you been in one?
Use a lot of.
yes, I was
Oh,
in the
really?
military for 12 years.
Oh, so it wasn't
Those aren't the ones that they're
So you-
selling at over at Quirk. So
Right. So essentially, but the bigger point is the Supreme Court refused to take up the case. So going forward, are they not opening the floodgates? If there is other mass shootings, which there may be, for them to sue that manufacturer and then that manufacturer, and is this a way to get around? They've been trying to make stricter gun laws. Every year we have to fight it, the stricter gun laws, and it's not been overly effective, right? So now, what are they going to try to break the manufacturers so we have no firearms to buy at all?
Yeah,
You know-
that's the intent. Yes.
Something just occurred to me. What if they violate an OSHA law in the manufacturing process? Have they not followed all laws and now they can be sued?
That's a good question, because
Somebody gets hurt on the job, now it's a OSHA violation, they get fined. Well, now we can sue you because
right. I mean,
somebody
this is,
stubbed their toe in the manufacturing
this
process.
is definitely creative.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, the reality is this is kind of a long shot, but then the Supreme Court didn't take the case up, so it's like,
And the state Supreme Court had already said, yeah, sure, go for it.
right, and that's why they had
And there was a 4-3 in Connecticut, and in Connecticut, I'm sure the Supreme Court is pretty liberal.
Yep.
It was still only 4-3, which means it was kind of sketchy.
They still might not win, but this is something.
Oh, they're
we have
not
to
going to
watch.
win. There's no way they'll
Yeah.
win.
we don't know that.
We don't know
Depends
that.
on the jury selection, right? I
Right.
mean,
Right.
Oh,
you're,
yeah.
you're selecting juries from the state that has Stanford and so
Yeah, but it's a Constitution state. Sorry.
Yep.
you're
yep.
a little too optimistic there, Gary.
No, I'm being sarcastic.
Yeah.
right, and so that's the biggest issue there is that it's going to open the floodgates, and it's going to allow for a lot more creative thinking amongst attorneys to come up with ways to get around this 2005 federal law.
Now, do you know, this is probably a little bit out of your wheelhouse, but do you know if Connecticut has a provision that if somebody sues somebody else and fails, do they have to pay the lawyer's fees for Remington?
You know, I don't know. I don't practice in Connecticut.
Right, I knew that, well, I assumed that, but I was just, that's the only redeeming thing that could come out of this is if the people with the deep pockets end up having to pay out of their own pocket
No.
to pay back Remington.
Right.
Right. Because that's it. I mean, Remington has the deep pockets. That's why they're going after Remington, right? There's, they're out there back up the money truck. We have to find who has the deep pockets, and that's
Right.
Remington, and that's why. So it's unfortunate, and of course, what happened at Sandy Hook was unfortunate. But you're not suing a slugger if somebody beats somebody with a bat,
Right, yeah, that'd be ridiculous.
Yeah.
or Cutco if somebody stabs somebody with a knife. So I don't know what other entity is under this type of attack other than
Firearms.
firearm manufacturers.
Well, I likened it to the lawsuits against the cigarette companies a few years back, right? It is every state wanted to drink at the trough of the money trough that was there, right? And they were suing based on advertising practices of the cigarette companies, but
Right,
no
that's what
one.
they're doing here.
They're doing
Right.
that with Juul now.
Right,
with
right.
the
No,
vaping
exactly.
people.
The problem I have with it is that the manufacturers, whether it's nicotine companies or firearms companies, these manufacturers are abiding by the laws. They're manufacturing a legal product. They're selling a legal product, and they're doing it under very strict regulation. Regulations that other industries don't have to deal with, and they're being sued for doing something legal. That's the problem that I have
Right.
with it. I had that problem with the cigarette companies, whether I'm a smoker or not, or whether I agree with their advertising practices or not. They're doing something perfectly legal and being sued for it. And
Right.
and if something like this is allowed to continue, then everybody's at risk. Right? Anyone going about their business in their daily life, any business, can just be sued just because somebody wants to. And if it's a large enough industry, such as the firearms industry, then you're going to have, if this succeeds in Connecticut, like you said, the floodgates are going to open, and there are going to be other people, probably even government entities, states, who decide, hey, SIG is in our state. Maybe we can get some money out of them, right? Let's just watch the news, and if anybody ends up using a SIG manufactured product, we'll go after them, right?
Well,
So
it'll be interesting.
any state that has a firearms organization or manufacturer in their state is going to be looking at the
Remington
money.
isn't even based in Connecticut.
Again,
It was. It must have moved. It was there a few years ago.
It was, yeah.
Yeah,
they
they
said-
might have moved out west.
Right, and
And that might be why they're suing.
And you
'cause they
also
left
got to
the state.
wonder how far they're going to let this go. I mean, in this case, it was Sandy Hook. It was a mass shooter. Well, what happens when it's not a mass shooter? Just somebody committing-
exactly. It can be anything. That's what I'm saying.
So, like
is
the
that
shooting in New Hampshire just not too long ago.
If this
Right.
succeeds, then there's going to be a set of lawyers and legislators who are going to be on the lookout
Right.
for any minor crime that is committed with a particular firearm from a particular manufacturer, and floodgates open.
Well, that's what I'm
right?
saying. I'll
They're
be
going to be ready to
interested to
go
see.
on day 2, the day after the incident.
Right, and then that's what I'm wondering, because we just had a shooting not too long ago that at the church. It was the
Pelham,
church.
yeah, church in
Yeah,
Pelham.
yeah,
Pelham.
yeah.
I got to wonder now. Whatever firearm was used in that, are they going to go after that manufacturer? Is
Right.
somebody going to go after that manufacturer? And then what about someplace like Chicago, where there's the highest murder rates? I mean, are they going to go sue?
Well, there's no guns in Chicago. At least that's
Well,
what
they're not
I
allowed.
heard.
No,
That's
it's
what I heard.
illegal.
Legally.
Yeah, it's a gun-free zone. They should be safe.
Wasn't it the last 2 mass shootings were in California?
Yeah, the last one was just a little while ago.
Yeah, the last 2 I think were
Yeah.
in California, and it's got the strictest, some
Yeah.
of the strictest gun laws. Like I'd have to go through my list, and I can't do it quick enough. But my understanding is they've already got every sale of a firearm in California has to go through a background check, even
Yep.
private sales,
Right.
which is the quote unquote BS gun hole loophole.
Yeah, but if you take away Chicago, you take away California. We really don't have a gun issue with mass shootings. It's not happening. It's
Right.
those states are where most of the people are being shot.
Well,
Firearms.
one of the problems with the mass shooting scenario is a mass shooting is I shouldn't say only, but is effectively only a shooting in a basically theoretically a confined area where 4 or more people are injured.
Right.
So it's not because people, look on the news, mass shootings, there's mass shootings. When we think of a mass shooting, we think of like the California where somebody goes
Right.
into a school or whatever and shoots a bunch of people indiscriminately. Whereas the number of mass shootings you see in the news, that high number, includes a drug dealer who just shot four
Other drug dealers. Yeah.
4 other drug dealers in Chicago.
Right.
That's considered a mass shooting also under the FBI's definition. So,
Right.
so the high number of mass shootings you see in the news is not real.
Right. And it's usually in gun-free zones.
Yes. Yep. It's the safest place
Place to
begin.
be, yeah. But safest place to have a mass shooting.
Yeah.
There's no guns.
So anyway, what else? What other stuff we got going on? We got a whole bunch of new gun.
Well, yeah, and I was actually going to mention this. He and I were discussing this earlier. Is it Ohio?
Ohio, yeah.
Now, are they trying to pass a law, or did it pass?
It's going to the Supreme Court in Ohio that you can't have alcohol in a house with guns.
yes.
Yeah, you can't.
Yeah.
You can't have firearms in a house where people drink.
So that's
Right.
another one we got to follow because what
Right.
what are you gonna if you buy a firearm now they're gonna come inspect your house, make sure you don't have any.
Yeah, right. Every time you go to the liquor store, the police are going to be there going, we have to search your house to see
now,
if you have
a gun.
firearms.
Yeah.
Can you guys explain what that case is? Because that's
I don't know any more than that. I don't know if you.
Right, I haven't actually thoroughly read up on that one. I just saw a blurb about it. But that's my understanding is that if there's alcohol in the house, there can't be firearms. So they're making it illegal to have firearms and alcohol in the same residence.
I read it as a little bit more liberal than that, where you're not supposed to handle firearms with alcohol at the same time.
Well, we all know that. It's not
Well,
a good,
exactly, we all know that, but
shouldn't drink and drive either.
but yeah, it was bringing up that point where are they going to go into your home? I think that the law is made so that you can't walk into a bar, have a beer in your hand, and a gun on your hip. But
Yes, that's
it's
still a
written
problem.
such that you can walk into somebody's house and inspect how they're storing their firearms while they're drinking alcohol. I don't know if it's strictly say, hey, if you have firearms, you can't have alcohol in your house at all. But
Right, well, like I said.
but it does go down that slope.
Yes.
It's that same slope that the feds go down with legalized marijuana in states like Denver, and is if you are known. See, I'm tapping.
Yeah.
If
No
you're
tapping.
known to be a marijuana user, or if you have a medical marijuana card, the ATF doesn't like you to own firearms.
Well, you
Well,
can't.
it's illegal.
It's illegal.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So, but that's the road that
Well,
Ohio
here's
seems
the
to be
problem
going
I have with
down.
that is I don't go into the pot cards. Let's say you're a home caretaker for someone who takes marijuana, but they can't drive. So you go down to the store to get their marijuana, but you can't do it unless you have a card because you get arrested. So you get the card, but you don't actually use marijuana, but now you've lost your gun rights. Why? Because you have a card. Not because you're using the marijuana, but because you have a card. So there's an issue with that too.
Right.
More so than just saying that it's illegal to smoke marijuana and own firearms.
Yeah,
That's a federal law.
There's a series of laws and that are being written deliberately to circumvent our Second Amendment rights, and this is one of them, right, in Ohio. It's giving the authorities the ability to go into your home and decide what you can and can't have in your home.
Right, and that's not just your Second Amendment, that's your Fourth Amendment,
Yep.
that's your Fifth Amendment, Fourth Amendment, search and seizure, Fifth Amendment, I'm thinking of due process.
Well, that's a good segue into New Hampshire laws because they're doing the same thing here in the state.
With which are you speaking? Which?
Which
I
one?
know, which are
all,
the good-
all of them.
Is there-
the,
is there-
the red flag law, the elder abuse law.
Well, there is HB, I believe it's 687, which is the ERPO extreme risk protection order statute that they retained from last year.
Right, right. And now John Burt got kicked off of that committee.
I heard.
Yeah.
But that particular bill, those extreme risk protection orders, they are in other states, but that's extremely invasive. That likewise, it's not
What
just
is, now, what does an extreme protection
extreme risk
protection order
yeah,
do?
ERPO. Well, what it does is the way the statute, the bill is written is essentially what they're going to do is it has to be a family member or a police officer can get a protective order against. Obviously, the police officer doesn't have to be related, but against somebody. Not because, and I had to write this down to make sure I get this correct, because it does some weird things that I think are worth noting. So what the bill says is the petitioner's belief that the respondent poses a significant risk of causing bodily injury to himself or herself or others by having a firearm or any ammunition. So the first thing we got to note is it's not just any threat, it's not just any weapon, it's just firearms or ammunition. And if somebody
Wouldn't
could
that person still be a threat with a machete or
Yeah,
a butter knife?
right, but that-
this
so-
isn't going to capture
I
them.
understand that.
Yeah.
If
Just
they're really
firearms.
concerned about our safety, why aren't they covering anything?
Well, that's the point.
They're not concerned
they're
about our
going after
safety.
firearms. This is-
They're concerned about
yeah,
our Second Amendment
This
rights.
is a firearms bill.
Right, and I'll note that the affidavit, again, this is from that bill, the affidavit shall contain specific factual allegations regarding the factors that give rise to the petitioner's belief that the person is this type of danger, okay? So you don't have to prove the person is a credible
it's
threat
complete
or they're an
hearsay.
Yeah.
actual threat. You just have to prove that you believe they are.
Right, and so it doesn't matter that they've restricted this to family members and police officers, because I can call up a police officer, come to my house, he can come to my front door, and I can say, officer, my next door neighbor's, a real pain in the butt. I don't like him. I think he's dangerous. I know he owns guns, right? Police officer goes
This
next
is
door.
this one doesn't do
and-
that though. This is
and-
family, right?
This is family and
And
police
police
officers.
officers.
Police
But anybody can make a complaint to a police officer,
Right,
and an
so-
overzealous, non-Second Amendment supporting police officer can just write up any affidavit he wants.
Right, so
And he can go right straight to the entire town and take care of everybody.
Right. So that's, it's restricted to, I can only complain against my own family members, but if my neighbor is a pain and I think they're a danger, I can call and articulate that to the police and then they can get the ERPO.
Okay.
So it looks like it's restricted to family members and police
So
officers.
Josh's neighbor finds out that he has a military grade bed.
Bed, yeah.
He might be a little bit like nervous.
Right.
Right,
So
right. And
So-
again, there is that caveat,
With a
right?
Humvee mount.
right.
Yeah, and again, there's the caveat. It's not that you don't have to prove that the person's a threat. You just have to prove that you believe they are. That's a very important
And that's the standard
distinction.
of proof in front of the House Intelligence Committee today.
Yeah.
Is as long as you believe something,
Yeah.
Right.
as long as you feel like
Yep.
you've been slighted by the president, then that's overwhelming evidence.
Right, and so that's another problem with this bill, though. It's like, okay, I believe in aliens, so if I prove I believe in aliens, they exist. Great,
I believe in mole people.
mole people, yes,
Mole people?
Yeah.
yes.
John Quincy Adams.
He believed there was mole people and used taxpayers' dollars to go find them.
Underground,
He thought
yeah.
they lived in the
No.
center, not the center of the earth, but
Seriously?
Yes,
yes,
absolutely.
true story.
Oh, that is awesome. I didn't know he was cool.
Other things about this House bill is the temporary relief. The burden is preponderance for the final relief, and it's not really final because it gets renewed yearly. The burden is clear and convincing. The other issue with this bill, though, is how much it tramples on the Fourth Amendment. I mean, this bill is so desperate to take away your Second Amendment rights, they're willing to trample on your Fourth Amendment right to get there.
Right.
Right? Because what they say is the search warrants have to have probable cause, right?
But
what
this
the-
doesn't have probable cause. It only has
Well-
somebody's feelings.
Let's talk about some creative writing again. What they say is search warrant if there is probable cause to believe the respondent has firearms or
Oh, geez.
ammunition, and if the court has reason to believe such items have not been turned over. So they have to have probable cause that the person owns firearms, but they only have to have a reasonable belief that they didn't hand them over. So the police can get a search warrant on that part two of that
You
two-part
own
equation.
firearms? Search warrant. Now I get the free run of your house and anything in it.
Right.
Right, and they
Well,
go,
because it includes ammunition, so that could be,
Right. They can
Stored
search, they're going
away-
to search through everything, and they say, "Oh, we're going to come back next week because just in case we didn't get everything, we're going to look again."
Ammunition can be nails and rocks,
Yeah.
right?
well,
right, but it goes a little further than that. It says they get to search wherever they have reasonably, now, can search where reason to believe firearms or ammunition are reasonably believed to be found.
okay,
Which
so,
means all of my family members' houses.
Bingo.
Neighbors,
Your gun club.
your gun club,
your business,
Yep.
yes?
right?
Right.
So
So
if
you
I
have one
wor-
search warrant covering an indefinite number of.
Well, as long as
People.
they believe it. As long as they believe it, and people. So your friends, you hang around with all the people at your gun club. They come down. Now we need the list of people in your gun club, and we're going to go search and see if your firearms are at their house.
and there's no way of identifying that they're necessarily his firearms.
Right, and
Well,
then
no,
it gets a
you
little,
have to prove that they're yours.
yes, so if you know, he
So,
he
so
leaves
he's
his-
next door to me. His house gets raided, and someone suggests, well, maybe he brought those over to Gary's house.
Right.
So they go through my house. They find firearms. I don't have evidence that they're necessarily mine.
Exactly.
So
Guess
they
what
just
happens?
say, "Oh, they're gone,"
We're taking them too, just in case.
just in case.
just in case, and then you got to
Because we believe it.
prove, and then you have to prove that they're your firearms to get them back, but they still, under this bill, cannot return them to you unless they do another check on you to make sure you're not a prohibited person. So,
Wow.
so your neighbor does something, you know, next thing you know, you're getting another background check because whoever filed the complaint against them
And now
believes the firearms
now
are
the
yours.
police have a list of all the guns I have,
Right.
Yeah.
which is basically a de facto
No, they
gun
have a list
registration.
of all the guns you no longer have.
Fair enough.
Right. So somebody who didn't even know this ERPO was going on, had no idea anything about it, suddenly the police are knocking at your door saying, I'm searching your house. What for? Well, because you might have so-and-so's firearms. I don't have those firearms here. Yeah, but we got the search warrant.
We believe you do.
You've lived next door to this guy who we just arrested for so many years. So
Right, but
we're gonna assume that you're friends and that. yeah.
I'm saying, but think about the implications of that. I'll give you an example. Pelham Fishing Game, I don't know how many members you have, but Pelham Fishing Game has over 2,000 members in the club. You are a regular shooter at that club. So does that mean those other 2,000 people or so,
These are acquaintances.
acquaintances,
Of yours?
you hang
And
around
we
the
don't
same
know
place?
which ones you're closer with
Right.
or not with, so we're gonna search all of
Now,
them.
I don't think it's going to go there right away, but that's where it's going to end up.
But it is a very low standard. I mean, reasonable belief is the second lowest standard under the law. I mean, the first lowest standard, you know, the absolute lowest standard is just normal citizen police contact. Hi, how are you today? You know, that's the first standard. The second level is reasonable.
It's
reasonableness.
reasonable to assume that I've had contact with every single member of my club.
Right.
And it's reasonable to assume that we're all pro Second Amendment and we all own firearms, and that when we do speak to each other, we talk about firearms.
Right.
Right? So that right there lends suspicion that we may have exchanged firearms.
You may have let them
yeah.
borrow some of your firearms, and we didn't get them all.
We were on
so-
the range, and hey, you want to try this out?
Yeah.
Hey, can I try yours out?
Yep.
So it's you know, a very bad law. I mean, I understand it's well intentioned, but it's already covered.
I don't
It's not
I don't
well-intentioned.
agree with
Let's
that.
not-
Okay,
let's not go there.
a lot
There's an intent there, but it's
let me.
Oh, the intent is firearms. That's clear.
But what I'm getting at is, if it was well intentioned, okay, because a lot of these red flag laws they say they're about keeping the family and the person safe, right? So the person, let's say Josh, because Josh is the one who's most likely for this to be true.
And he's a person.
oh, here we go.
So Josh has had a rough night on his military grade bed.
Yep.
He's unstable. So his wife calls and says he's unstable. Now, if he's really unstable, the proper thing would be to address the behavior or attitude of Josh.
Well, I mean, unstable is pretty unclear.
I know, but I'm saying if you're going to call the police and say, hey, this guy's got guns, I'm worried about him, you should be worried about his mental state, right? Because that's all you care. The gun is just a tool. So the real concern is Josh himself. So if this legislation was about preventing people being killed with firearms or any other means, the first course of action would be to take Josh, get him out of the environment, talk to him, and find out if there's, what's going on, or maybe get a psych eval or something like that to make sure Josh is okay. Because if you go to Josh's house, take all his guns, and he's actually as unstable as I mean, theoretically, he is actually unstable. That means you just left him home with a cabinet full of drugs that he can kill himself with.
Look,
Drugs,
there's
They
already
don't
a,
care about
Knives.
Josh.
but there's
All they
already a
care
law
about
for
is
that.
taking
Right.
guns.
There's
Huh?
already a law for that.
I'm just saying, if this was about that,
Right.
that's what they would be.
Exactly. There's
There's already-
already process in place for someone who is unstable.
Right.
But this process is to go into a home, find somebody who's unstable, remove just the firearms, and then leave him
Hang on.
behind.
Wait a minute.
They don't even have to be unstable. You just have to believe they're unstable.
And again,
I can't
It
tell you
can't
how
be
many
just
people
anybody.
believe that I am unstable.
Stable. There you go. So I think they should include the stone wall in front of your house, so the police have to come down and collect your entire stone wall and bring it down to the police
Yeah, I
station.
can use that to hurt
Yeah,
somebody
you could just be
seriously.
throwing them out lobbing your Fred Flintstone rocks out in the street.
right. I mean, clearly, it's again, it's an attack on firearms, and there's too many examples within the statute the way it's written. That they're a danger by having a firearm. How
Right.
can you say it's not about firearms when it's literally limited to people who have
Are we giving them
firearms?
ideas on how to edit their statute before it
think
gets
we
passed?
already
We
did that.
argued all this last year.
Yeah, I think we did this already. And Nicole, you have an article on
And they're
Granite
not
Rock
smart
and-
enough to redraft it to
They did,
fill
but-
in all
They
these?
changed a
Some of
minor
it,
stuff.
but not enough.
Right. So we'll be arguing again this year.
Well, I don't know if there's
Is
an
a-
argument
is a
because it
mental
goes
disease.
it goes to the floor of the house.
Well,
And
this is you telling
yeah,
us.
there won't be a hearing because the hearing was already held last year, right?
Correct.
So now it goes
I
to
believe it
vote.
goes right to the floor of the House
So it's
because
gonna-
it's already got a recommendation from the committee. So the next stop is at the floor of the
There
House.
Yeah,
was
is
no recommendation.
They come out with no recommendation to pass.
That's
it, yeah.
actually good.
Yeah.
That means if they couldn't even have the votes to pass it in committee, that means it's depending on law. I'll tell you, I had an experience in 2001, my first term, that blew me away, and it really bothered me. It was Martha Fuller Clark was a legislator, a state rep.
Yeah.
And she had a bill to basically, the Massachusetts bill to try to get rid of Saturday night specials. They heat it up to 5 million degrees, and if parts of it melt, then
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
no longer. I'm exaggerating, but basically that was the bill. It was designed after a Massachusetts bill, and the entire state legislature at the hearing of that bill was full of pro Second Amendment. Go New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm.
The whole 9 yards. It was like at least 400 people in there really upset at this BS. And the reason it upset me was because I realized that if there was a shooting at the Concord High School the day before, that same room would have been full of 400 people asking for them to do something about firearm violence.
But well, there is no such thing as firearm violence.
I
It's
get
just
that.
Violence in general. Yeah.
I get that, but what I'm getting at is public opinion
yes.
is sketchy and
Yep.
not something to depend on. So what happens right before, like based on what we know right now, and the committee vote, I would guarantee you that's going to die on the House floor.
Mm-hmm.
But it depends. If some idiot does something the day before, that's going
Right.
to flip it.
And it shouldn't. Because
And it
it's-
shouldn't.
It's not critical thinking. I mean,
I know
Yeah.
there's a lot of non-critical.
Yeah.
Watch Washington D.C.
I
over
did.
the
I
last
watched
few
the hearings
hours.
over the last couple hours. Like, what a zoo, what a circus.
It is insane.
Yeah.
Oh, before we go, we have time, but I gotta point this out. So for people who might not know this, there's a little side story about the BS going in Washington, where they're trying to impeach Trump for doing his job. Schulman what was the guy testifying to? Schulman or something? Schulman?
Sure, yeah, whatever it was. He's the
S-
ambassador
To
to
the
Europe,
Europe.
European
Yeah,
Union.
the ambassador to Europe was testifying today. What you might not find out in the regular news is a Oregon congressman was orchestrating a boycott of his wife's business interests, hotels and stuff like that, at the same time.
Really?
Democrat.
A
Congressman.
Democrat.
So a
So
Democrat
he's a-
representative.
A Democrat congressional representative was blackmailing the person testifying today.
Really?
Saying
But
Yeah.
that's okay.
he's organizing a boycott of his wife's businesses
While he's testifying.
Fine.
in order to get him to testify to the right things.
Well, apparently he didn't.
So,
Well,
well, see,
he said
his-
it was definitely quid pro quo.
No.
but- Oh, he did.
He said that in his opening statement.
Yeah,
And
yes.
then in cross-examination, he says, well, by my perception.
right.
Right, yeah, he changed
believes-
it.
Right. The testimony was very clear that President Trump was curt with him and said, "I don't want anything from Ukraine."
Right.
No, specifically the words "no quid
Quid.
pro quo,"
Right.
and he was forced to testify to that. But back to this public opinion business, what happened was he had a 27-page written opening statement,
Right.
and that 27-page written open statement was released to the press prior to the hearing this morning.
Right.
So the press knew what he was going to say during his opening statement. This business of he believed this
Right.
was quid pro quo. As soon as his opening statement was finished, he finished reading it. They broke. Schiff goes out, has a press conference, says this is the bombshell, and so all the headlines went out. Right, bombshell, quid pro quo, and so now all the headlines are out. Public perception has already been created by the mainstream media, and then 3-4 hours later, we get him to testify very clearly, very succinctly that there was no.
Right.
That the orders from the president were very specific. I don't want anything. But that's that whole public
But
perception.
he
Once
still
there's-
was holding on to, but under my perception, he definitely
Exactly.
did. And he was
But-
unwilling to let go of that.
But it was all orchestrated to present a public perception to the media via his opening statement prior to actually being cross-examined by the conservatives who got the truth out of him. And
Right.
so it doesn't matter. What's being reported is absolutely 180 degrees from what actually took place in
Right.
that hearing today.
Yeah.
It's insane.
And that's what you're saying is that
Well,
public
and-
opinion is going to
yes,
be a problem.
and in Wisconsin, Trump is doing much better since the past couple days with these impeachment hearings. His approval ratings going up.
Yeah,
know.
and that's one of the battleground states.
Yeah.
They've pretty much guaranteed themselves, and they're not
I
going to
think
get
there's
it.
the 80% of the reasonable people out there are starting to look at this and go, what are you doing? Because this is for 3.5 years.
I mean,
Oh,
Try-
even well-known liberal pundits on some of the mainstream channels are starting to say, "Hey, we're kind of going down the wrong road here,"
Yeah.
and they're making these grumblings a little quieter, but they're getting louder over the last
Yeah,
couple
because
of weeks.
they're going nowhere. It's like the aha is not there.
Right.
There is no there, you say.
right? They keep coming with an but know how to follow
Yeah,
it
there
up,
you
right?
go.
Okay, Nicole, what other do you?
How many other bills do we have?
What other bills?
Well, so the upcoming 2020
We got these
LSRs.
expert witnesses, and we're not taking advantage of it.
Well, let me see.
be happy to come back.
we have the we don't have language yet.
highly paid guests.
Yeah.
We have the titles, we just don't have the language yet. So
Right,
we
right.
have to up these titles. We're kind of assuming these are bad bills. But we have imposing a ban on assault weapons. Sounds like a bad one. Background check on commercial firearm sale. Both of those they had last year too, so we kind of know what they're going to say. Waiting period between purchase and delivery of firearm. Again, we had it last year. We kind of know what it's going to say. Relative to possession of firearms in school property. Relative to a discharge of a firearm in a compact part of a city or town. Prohibiting the
Part of a city or town.
Yeah.
What is,
compact. So many houses within a certain
I think
area.
it's 6 or more within 300 feet of each other.
oh, so if you live here,
'Cause there's already a
you
statute.
you give up your
Oh yeah, you do it
Second
now.
Amendment
There's
rights.
a lot of people have lost their firearms because they shoot a skunk or a raccoon in their backyard, and they go over to the fishing game, and the police, 295 feet.
But that statute's already on
The books.
the
Yeah,
book, so I don't
we've
know
fought
where they're
that
going with
for
that one.
Different issues.
They also want to prohibit the manufacture, sale, transfer, and possession of large capacity ammunition feeding devices.
Right.
They're changing their language because
Yep.
they can't say
Clip a
clips
magazine, yep.
with a straight face anymore.
Yeah, repealing limited liability from manufacturers.
Wait. If they
distributors-
repeal the high
Whoa.
capacity feeding devices, how am I ever going to get a deer?
There you go.
Yeah. They also. Well, I'm just looking at it. I mean, it's like we're
You don't have the
guessing.
deer
I
trap?
know,
We're guessing what it's going to say.
I'm just being a jerk.
Yeah.
Right?
Go ahead.
I'm not even done yet. Repealing limited liability for manufacturers, distributors, dealers, or importers of firearms and ammunition.
So they want to
So,
repeal.
Targeting Ruger and Sig right
Yep.
there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. But again, there's still the federal law in place.
Right.
So, relative to the forfeiture of seized personal property. Not sure where they're going with that, but
That could be a good one actually.
Well, I think right now they're required to sell the firearms in the state of New Hampshire. If police seize firearms and they have them and they do that thing, they have forced to sell them, or the state
Wasn't
is.
one of the
anyway.
recent mass shootings done with a sold
No,
firearm?
I think the person was shot, and the gun that was found next to him was a gun that was turned in a gun turn-in program. So, yeah, oops.
I
That was
shouldn't
in-
laugh, but
But
that's
that was in police possession. So the kid or person or whatever it was shot by a cop, I believe, and then they found the gun was sitting next to the person. And then when they ran the gun, it was a gun that was turned into the police.
wow.
So somebody's in trouble.
Maybe it fell through the cracks through the
Yeah,
Fast and
I-
Furious
there could be
program
another-
where the feds
there
were
could-
giving away guns. to
yeah, I think
criminals.
somebody's in trouble.
There could be a more nefarious, the old thing about the cop leaving a gun, taking a gun and
Yeah.
putting it next to the somebody to make them look guilty.
Oh, it kind of sounds like that.
Yeah, that could be that too. So.
Yeah.
Want me to keep going with
Yeah,
all
yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Establishing
This
a
is fun.
protective order for vulnerable adults. They did that last year as well. There's division on this one. My understanding was some pro-firearm people were for this legislation and other pro-firearm people
Yeah, I
are
don't
against
remember
it.
why.
No, if they establish protection for someone like my father as he gets older, are they going to confiscate all of his firearms, or can I come
Well,
in
the
there
way
and
it
take
was
them?
originally written, and again, we don't have the new language, so I don't know
Right.
how it's written now, but the way it was originally written, it would even, if what was it? It was so loose. It was like even, like if you took so let's say I was taking care of my elderly father. He's not elderly, but let's say he was, and I was taking care of him.
She didn't mean to call you elderly.
Right,
Nick,
right.
If you're listening.
So, so here I am taking care of my elderly father, and I decide, hey, you know what, Dad, I need a $500 loan. I'll pay you back in 3 weeks. He gives me the $500 loan, but presumably he can't make that decision. So my sibling says, she stole $500 from him. Next thing you know, my firearms are gone because he did not have the capacity to loan me the
You
money.
abused as a,
Right,
a
because I'm his
vulnerable
caretaker,
person.
and I
Right, and you know that happens a lot, and it doesn't even have to be true, which
Right.
isn't true in this case. Yeah. You're not old, Nick.
Right, so we'll have to see what the language is. They want to establish a committee to study firearm incidents involving children with access to unsecured firearms. Requiring a law.
Now that's actually kind of funny because one of the things you don't do is create a committee in an election year because nobody shows up for them.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Well, that's some inside knowledge I did not have.
Yeah, typically it's. I mean, they'll vote for it, right? But I'm saying is what happens is because all this 30% of the legislators don't even show up the next year because the pay's not great, and so you have a 30% turnover, and another 30% have to fight to keep their seat. So you've got 2/3 of the legislature that's busy during the summer trying to hold on to their seat. And so when they have these committees over the summer of an election year, that's very not well attended, which might be an advantage to them because they can maybe stack the deck of people who really want to portray this as a huge problem. So, but
Okay, moving on. Requiring a locking safety device to be provided for commercial firearm sales and transfers.
It's already done.
Yeah, everybody does. That's
That's
voluntary.
law. I think it's a
No
law.
one-
It's a federal law that you have to provide a lock.
I don't think I've ever bought a firearm that didn't come with a locking device.
Federal law.
Yeah, it's a federal law.
Yeah.
Relative to voluntarily surrendering firearms. Relative to emergency threat orders. Which I suppose that one is going down the same road as the ERPOs and the vulnerable adults. That now they're calling it threat orders.
They're going at it from two different angles.
Right. And there's also a Senate bill being proposed relative to protective orders for vulnerable adults. So there's a bill in the House and the Senate with regard to the protective adults.
One that catches my curiosity every time it's tried is the assault weapons ban. I think that was number 2 or 3 on your list.
I'm sorry.
The attempt to ban assault weapons.
Mm-hmm.
So it's too bad we don't have the language because we got to find out what's their definition of an assault weapon.
Right.
No one's ever defined it yet.
Right.
It's never been clearly defined. Not in any state. Not in Washington. Not by the ATF.
We'll
no one's
get
ever
it soon.
defined what it is.
Well-
I'm not allowed to bring one. I don't think I'm allowed to bring guns into the studio. I used to be able to, but I'd love to because I have 3 223s.
Yeah,
One of them is a Tikka
right.
that I would say is easily the most lethal of the 3 because it can, shoot a fly's eyeball out at about 100 yards.
Right.
Then I have a Mini 14, which looks like a hunting rifle, and an AR-15 that is the one that they're
It's
targeting.
Black. It's
so
black
to
and
speak.
scary.
It's black, but the Tikka is probably the most lethal just because it's so accurate.
Yep.
It's just, the whole thing is stupid. But yeah, it's ridiculous. And the thing that bothers me is that when I first started up there was a pretty good, strong core of Democrats that were anti-Second Amendment. But as you saw this last year, at least 2 or 3 of those bills are repeats. And under House rules, because I'm sure people who watch the show are familiar that we shouldn't be repeating the same bill. And House rules say you can't if the House has rejected it.
Right.
The reason Representative Rogers can reintroduce the same bill over and over again is because the House already passed it.
Right.
If it passes in the affirmative,
Right.
then they can reintroduce it. And these are the same bills the governor vetoed last spring, and we sustained the veto in the fall. And what's really bothering me is that if people don't get active, get involved in groups like Go New Hampshire, and start doing something. I mean, last September, it was very bothersome to me that if, I don't know what the number was, but say 10 Republicans came down with the flu and didn't show up that day, and it just flipped a little bit, there wasn't that many votes that you needed for that veto to be overridden. And it's scary to me that your Second Amendment rights are so dependent on whether or not I get ill. And people need to get active and need to get involved with Go New Hampshire so they can be up to date. And if you can get up there and testify, if somebody wants to get up and testify against some of these bills, they can contact you guys, right?
Yeah.
And if they can contact me, I'm certainly willing to, hold somebody's hand so they can get up and.
Well, it's, as you know, for testimony, it's critical that people show up because representatives want to be reelected. And if they think people actually care about this information, so, for example, if you call your representative, that means a certain number of votes to you. If you get a letter, it means a certain number of votes. If you show up at the State House because you're upset about something, it means a whole bunch of votes.
Right.
So that's how people should be paying attention. Is some of these people, though, don't care. I don't think they care if they get reelected. They're like kamikaze in themselves. They don't care. They
Right.
want this stuff pushed forward.
Yeah.
This is an agenda.
Okay, so Representative.
not about protection,
So
it's
Representative
keeping people
Rogers
safe.
and a few others, you're absolutely right. They don't care, and I think they're in districts where they don't care. They just want to take away your guns, period.
Right.
And they really don't care the ramifications. But the thing is when you go to testify in that committee, there's 20 state reps in there.
Right.
And a lot of them aren't really necessarily that pro or con anything. And so if somebody from your district gets up and says,
Right.
I don't like this, I'm sick of you guys trying to take away my rights, and I'm getting really upset that I have to miss work to come up here
Right.
and fight garbage like
But
this.
well, that's what I'm saying. It's critical that you do it because they keep attacking us, and all of us work
Yeah.
somewhere else. We actually have a job, and to have to take a day out of work and go out here, and sometimes the way they set up the hearings now, they have one at 10 in the morning and one at 3 in the afternoon. So you just can't take a half a day out of work. You've got to take the entire day out of work.
Right. Yeah.
And they're making it more difficult for the actually this republic to work properly, the democratic process to do.
Yeah,
what
they're
it's
they're,
supposed to do.
they're definitely trying to
Yeah.
weed out.
Any way they can. So we have to be vigilant. We have to keep coming back, and we have to keep testifying. I mean, it's a long time, and this is the worst I've seen it. The number of attacks on our rights. And when you go and talk to some of these people, they don't care. Forget about talking about the Constitution. They don't care about the Constitution. I take this oath. That doesn't mean anything. I have an agenda. So I know this year we had a different way of testifying on the no guns in school bill. I went back, my testimony, and it was Nicole's idea, by the way, but I went up with it and said you're disenfranchising single mothers by saying that they can't bring firearms to school because they walk to school with their kids through dangerous neighborhoods. And if they have a protective order, the person they have a protective order against knows they're unarmed when they're walking to and from school. You're going to make that happen.
Right.
Now they have a firearm, but they can't carry it into school.
Okay, so
now.
we get like a few seconds left.
Sure.
How can people get in touch with you? Where do they go?
To our Facebook page right now, or to our website, gonh.org. We have a GoPhone, and I don't have the number in front of me, but it's on the website and it's on the Facebook page that you can call us if you have a question or issue, and we'll get back to you.
Yeah,
as soon as possible.
it's wicked important people get active.
Yeah.
Mitch, Nicole, Josh. Thank you guys. We'll see you next
Yeah.
week.
Thanks.